And today for this fall craft cocktail, we're making a stirred bourbon cocktail with a brown butter fat washed bourbon, and we're also gonna make a white miso syrup. The flavor is crazy in this cocktail. You get that mixture of caramelized fats and that umami note from the white miso. It's fantastic. This cocktail is called That Scene from the Revenant. All right, so the build for That Scene from the Revenant is 2 ounces of brown butter bourbon, a ½ ounce of dry vermouth, a ¼ ounce of white miso syrup, 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. That's stirred, that's served up, and there's no garnish on that cocktail. So we have not done fat washing yet on this channel. This is gonna be the first time, so it's a cool technique to learn, guys. Basically, the concept of fat washing is infusing a fat into an alcohol, freezing it overnight so the fat solidifies, but it leaves behind a plethora of flavor, and it really rounds out the alcohol itself. In this context, we're gonna use butter, and we're gonna brown the butter before we do that. So it's a little extra level of flavor in that process just to get into this cocktail. It's really cool. So with that being said, let's jump into the prep work for this cocktail. So the tools you're gonna need for the prep: you're gonna need a cutting board, you're gonna need a knife, you're gonna need a kitchen scale or something that can weigh out grams, you're gonna need a measuring cup, you're gonna need a wide mouth container to store your fat washed bourbon overnight, and you're gonna need some coffee filters or some cheesecloth. And you may need some additional storage containers as well. All right, so the first thing we're gonna be making for our prep work today is we're gonna be making that brown butter fat washed bourbon. And the recipe for that brown butter bourbon, you're gonna need 1 liter of bourbon to 250 grams of butter. Now that will yield roughly 16 cocktails. So if you don't need to make that many cocktails, maybe cut that in half to 500 liters of bourbon. Just make sure you keep those ratios the same. So for every liter of bourbon, it's 250 grams of butter. So the first step in that process, we gotta weigh out our butter, and then we gotta brown it. Let's grab our kitchen scale and set that over here. Grab a container to place on that scale, and let's get our butter out and start weighing it up. So we are gonna turn on that scale. Make sure you zero out that scale with the container on there. And let's just start by weighing out a couple pieces here. Now, I made a batch yesterday, so I'm gonna make a little bit smaller of a batch today. Then I'll have enough of the cocktails I need to make. All right, so I got my butter weighed out. I'm just gonna cut that into smaller slices so it melts a little quicker. And just gonna throw that into your pot. Butter's slippery. Got a small piece there. There, boom. All right, so once you have the butter in your pot, you're gonna go ahead and turn that up to a medium-high heat, and you're gonna let that melt down, and basically you just wanna watch it until it gets to that perfect golden brown. Tell you what, I'm even gonna grab this camera out of the holder here, and we're gonna flip this bad boy around, and this way you get a little view here of actually the butter browning, because this is a little bit of an important process. You want to make sure you don't over brown it, you know? You want to make sure you don't screw it up, burn it. So you see it starts to melt down pretty quickly, and the use of like caramelized fats, man, is so awesome in baking. I wish it was used more in cocktails. I really think, especially in the fall and the winter months, it adds such an awesome just note to cocktails. In this process of fat washing, you're gonna start seeing a little bit more now. I know coming up in the winter, we're gonna do a duck fat washed Grand Marnier. Get ready for that. That's gonna be a sick cocktail. And it's basically the same process, except you're not gonna brown the fat. We got our butter melted down here. And I'll probably speed this video up, get a little time lapse going, so you can see how it browns and when like the perfect time to pull it is. Start up. Yeah, sure. You gotta be real careful when you're browning butter too. Like, it can burn real quick. When you see that moment where it's brown, you start to smell those toffee notes, pull it. You know, you don't want to sit too long because it can brown in a blink of an eye. Or it can burn in the blink of an eye from that moment. Starting to smell good, man. You can smell that butter cooking. Start to see a little bit of those brown bits at the bottom there. We're getting close. Here we go. Butter is browning. Just a few more seconds. Start to smell those toffee notes. That's perfect, guys. Let's take that off the heat real quick. I'm gonna flip this camera back around. Get it in there. All right, so that is good. I got that off of here. What I am gonna do, guys, so this stops browning, grab my wide mouth container, and I'm just gonna pour this into the container already. Right, you wanna make sure all those good brown notes here, you don't wanna waste that, you know? As much as we're gonna get. So, we got our butter there. Let's grab our measuring cup, and if you did 250 grams of butter, measure out your full liter of bourbon. If you wanted to do half that, that would have been 500 milliliters of bourbon to 125 grams of butter. If you want to do a quarter of that, it'd be 250 liters of bourbon to 62.5 grams of butter, I think. So, let's measure out our bourbon. Gonna pour that in to the butter. Now you want a wide mouth container for this, guys, because you want as much surface area as possible. You want it to spread out so that way there's as much surface contact between the butter and the bourbon. If it's in a tall, thin container, then the butter's all just gonna be at the top as opposed to spread across the whole surface area of the bourbon. So give that a stir. Let me turn this back on since I didn't have the fucking close-up camera on for the butter pour. That's fine. So yeah. Give this a stir, right? Mix in the butter and the bourbon really good. Agitate it really good. And what you're gonna wanna do is set that aside on your counter for about an hour, stirring every so often. Now, I'm gonna show you the next step in our bourbon here. So, we had this on the counter for an hour. We stirred it every so often. After an hour, you're gonna wanna make sure to seal it up, put it in your freezer overnight. 24 hours, that's gonna sit in your freezer. And what's gonna happen is the fat solids are gonna kind of rise and they're gonna freeze mostly at the top. And then we're gonna go to our next step, which is straining. All right, so 24 hours in the freezer. Mine got knocked around a bit in the freezer, so it's not like all pretty, but you can kind of see the frozen butter in there and how the bourbon is separated from that. Now, what we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to strain this pretty good so we don't have all those butter solids in there. The first step, what I am going to do, I'm gonna strain through a basket strainer first. I wanna make sure I don't lose too much product, so I'm just gonna run it through the basket strainer and see if that gets all the solids out that I need. And you can see this butter we have left over. Now this butter, if you would like, you could save this and you could bake cookies with it, brownies. It's pretty cool. You get kind of a little bit of a bourbon note in those like cookies or brownies. I love using brown butter in chocolate chip cookies. So to have a little bourbon brown butter is fucking awesome. So as you can see here, this is our brown butter bourbon. It is a little bit of sediment still in there. So the next thing I would say we need to do is strain it again through either a coffee filter or cheesecloth. Honestly, cheesecloth preferably. I think a coffee filter is going to take a little long, but we're going to go ahead and give it a shot anyways. So you're just going to pour that right in and just allow that to strain. And there's our brown butter bourbon. And once that's strained, we are ready to go on that, guys. The shelf life, I would say, is up to 2 weeks refrigerated. So our next step is we're gonna make that white miso syrup. I'm gonna wash my pot real quick and we're gonna jump right into that. All right, so for our white miso syrup, we're gonna need 250 milliliters of water. We're gonna need 1 tablespoon of white miso paste, and we're gonna need 500 grams of sugar. So let's grab our measuring cup to start, and we're gonna measure out our 250 milliliters of water. All right, 250 milliliters of water. Gonna add that into the pot here. Next, let's go ahead and grab our white miso paste. You can find this stuff at Whole Foods, guys. It's pretty awesome. Smells so good. Or bad. It's one of those things, actually. It could smell bad to you. All right, so we got a tablespoon of our white miso paste. We're gonna go ahead and just get that into the pot with the water. Scoop that all in there. Use your fingers, get dirty. Make sure your hands are clean. All right, now, before we add the sugar in, we're gonna go ahead and turn our burner on, medium-high heat, and you're gonna wanna stir that miso into the water, right? So you want the miso paste to completely dissolve into the water before we add our sugar in. All right, we're gonna let that heat up, let that miso go. Let's grab our kitchen scale. I'm gonna grab another container, place it on that scale. Make sure your scale's on, and make sure that scale is zeroed out. We're gonna weigh out 500 grams of sugar. Should have got a bigger container, maybe? We're gonna make it fit. 500 grams of sugar. Pile of that Colombian Bam Bam. All right, so let's give that miso and water a stir again. Really wanna make sure there's no chunks or very, very few chunks. Gets dissolved in there. Honestly, it just smells like miso soup up in here now. All right, that is dissolved pretty well. We're gonna go ahead and dump our sugar into the pot. Now guys, this is basically a 2-to-1 syrup recipe. We've mostly worked with 1-to-1s. Oh shit. Hear that thunder? It's about to start storming up in here. Yeah, so this is essentially a 2-to-1 syrup. So it's gonna have a little thicker viscosity, it's gonna be a little sweeter, so you know, we're only using 1/4 ounce in this cocktail. We don't really want it to be too sweet of a cocktail. Everything's about balance. It's also great that this is a 2-to-1 because that sweetness kind of balances out those savory umami notes of the white miso. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna keep stirring this, bring this up to a boil. We want all that sugar to dissolve. And while we wait, I'm gonna grab a container, some blue tape, just label and date it. Guys, and I would say your shelf life on this is up to a month refrigerated. Almost there, sugar's almost all dissolved. Gonna give this a little shake over here just to maybe get it draining a little faster. We're almost fully strained on that. All right, guys, that is looking good. Now you don't wanna let that cool a little bit if it's too hot for you to pour. And once you are done, you don't need to strain it or anything. Just gonna pour it into your storage container. You already label and date it, throw it on a lid. Guys, again, shelf life in the fridge, up to a month refrigerated. Yo, so that's it on all the prep today, guys. We made our brown butter bourbon. When you're done straining with that, hey, bottle it up, package it up, label and date it as always. We got our white miso syrup. All right, so let's jump into making our cocktail. That scene from The Revenant. Went ahead and put my white miso syrup in this cheater bottle here to make it easy to pour. I got my brown butter bourbon right there in my Chemex just to make it easy. So this is a stirred cocktail. So first thing we are going to need is our mixing glass. We're gonna need our jigger. And we're gonna need our glassware. I'm not certain that's the right glassware. That's the only upstem glassware I had right now. So it might be a little big, but it'll drink all the same. So, as always, guys, start from cheapest ingredients to most expensive ingredients. So, we're gonna start with our 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. We got our 1/4 ounce of white miso syrup. We got our 1/2 ounce dry vermouth. And we got our 2 ounces of our brown butter fat washed bourbon. All right, let's grab some ice. Fill that ice all the way up above the liquid. Grab our bar spoon. As always, we are gonna stir for 20 seconds. All right, guys, 20 seconds. Grab your Hawthorne strainer and let's pour up the cocktail, baby. It's pretty, gonna be tasty. There it is, guys. That scene from the Revenant. Brown butter bourbon, white miso syrup, dry vermouth, little Ango. Let's taste. And I haven't had this cocktail in a while, so. Yeah, that bourbon, you can tell it just has really round, has a lot of caramelized notes from that butter. The mouth feels a little fattier. It sticks onto the inside of the mouth a little bit more onto the taste buds. Get that umami from the white miso. Definitely get the cinnamon from the Ango big time on this. It really comes through. This is such a perfect stirred bourbon cocktail for the fall. Man, this is definitely something you want to sip by a little fire. Sip on Halloween night. I don't know, man. Sip on Thanksgiving. That is awesome. And honestly, I got a little hangover right now, so this is kind of like hair of the dog for me. So perfect, man. All right, y'all, that is it. That scene from the Revenant. Way easier on us than the bear was on Leo. Super tasty. Really rounded out with that brown butter bourbon fat wash, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the recipe. Maybe you made it along with me. Maybe you wrote it down, saved it for a later date. Either way, let me know how you're liking everything. And hey, guys, become a regular. Become a regular at your local watering hole. It's the best way to support local business, and become a regular here at Happiness Bar by liking, commenting, subscribing. Hit that bell if you want notifications. We got cocktail videos coming out every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Get you ready for the weekend. Stay happy, everyone. Ow.